We are speaking now to Mark Adamson from the Office of Public Works, the OPW in Ireland. Mark, can you just talk us through what you discussed in your presentation just now?
Yes, I was here really talking about I think some of the principal challenges and opportunities that the Floods Directive is throwing at member states now. I think it is a challenging directive to meet. I think it's flexible to allow member states to look at flood risk management in a context that's appropriate for their member state, but nonetheless there are requirements there which are challenging. And I think first and foremost amongst these is the need for member states to look not just at the river floods and the coastal floods that we are fairly well experienced in looking at in terms of assessing and managing risks, but there are many other sources of flooding where perhaps that experience isn't as strong as it is, particularly in relation to rivers and the coast. And I think at various levels that is going to challenge member states in terms of the way they approach the implementation of the directive. A good example would be the preliminary flood risk assessment that all member states need to undertake to screen for where risk might be significant. And we do this using historical information on floods that have happened in the past, and on predictive information in terms of our assessments of where flooding may happen in the future. And I think in relation to some of these other sources of flooding, a lot of that historical information simply isn't there. Or if it is there, then it's perhaps not in a format that's readily usable for this kind of assessment. So member states may need to look at ways of assessing these types of risk at a screening level, and I think that it could be quite challenging.
And therein lies the added value of conferences such as this, whereby not only member states, national, let's say, public bodies, but also civil society organisations can exchange best practice and share ideas.
Absolutely. I think some of the opportunities that have arisen from the Floods Directive, obviously it's here, it'll be improving flood risk management throughout Europe, but I think a great advantage to the Floods Directive is that it has really promoted information exchange between member states and amongst the professional community around Europe, and I think that's for everybody's benefit.
You're approaching this obviously from the Irish national perspective, but what's your sense of how the two directives are being implemented generally throughout Europe?
Well, I think that there's a challenge there as well in terms of the coordination that's required between the Floods Directive and the Water Framework Directive. Certainly in Ireland we're talking to our partners, our colleagues in the government who are responsible for the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. And I think there will be challenges in terms of different pressures in terms of treating water as a resource that needs to be protected as opposed to a potential threat to human life and safety. But I think with good communication, those kind of challenges can be met, and we can look at looking for measures that will provide benefits both in terms of flood risk management and in terms of water quality, such as the implementation of wetlands.
In the coming years, what do you expect other challenges to be? How will these directives pan out as they progress and as the member states try to implement them?
Well, I think as we come to the identification of flood risk through the flood mapping that's required under the directive, we'll be identifying large areas which are potentially at risk from flooding. But when we come to looking at the measures we need to introduce to try and manage that risk, we could find that there will be a vast array of measures with a huge financial input required to manage the risk that we've now identified. And obviously perhaps all of that money is not going to be available up front. So we need to be very careful about how we communicate the risk and prioritise the measures to try and manage that risk in an affordable way.
And do you believe that these sister directives, as they call them, that they provide the right tools to allow the member states to succeed in these goals?
Well, certainly I think the Floods Directive does. I wouldn't be so familiar with the Water Framework Directive, but the Floods Directive it sets out what I would consider to be a framework of best practice for managing flood risks in Europe. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, it is flexible, and so it allows member states to take that framework, that process, and adapt it and apply it in a way that is most appropriate to their individual contexts.
Mark Adamson, thank you very much.
Thank you.